Picture this, a small town hospital. Spring night, air thick with worry, and that faint scent of antiseptic. And a young mother, Diane Downs, bursts through the doors, panicked, covered in blood. Her three children, Christie, Cheryl, and Danny, are with her, each bearing the chilling mark of gunshots. The story spills from her lips, a tale of a terrifying encounter on a dark road, a stranger, a demand for her car, and then the horrifying moment the gun fires. Initially, the community rallies around her, offering comfort and support to a mother who has faced every parent's worst nightmare. But as the details of that night are scrutinized, something doesn't feel right. The narrative shifts, the inconsistencies begin to surface, and the image of a distraught mother starts to warp, morphing into something much more sinister. This is the story of Diane Downs, a case where the line between love and violence blurs in the most unimaginable way.
It's a case that truly chills you to the bone. You have this image of a frantic mother rushing to save her children, and then as the layers are peeled back, you're left questioning everything you thought you knew.
Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. Today we're diving deep into the heart of this case, dissecting the evidence, and trying to understand what could drive a mother to betray the very people she swore to protect.
It's a complex story, one that delves into the darkest corners of human psychology. Before we get to that horrific night, it's crucial to understand who Diane Downs was. On the surface, she was a seemingly typical young woman. She'd grown up in Arizona, later moving to Oregon with her husband Steve, and their three beautiful children, Christie, Cheryl, and Danny. But beneath this seemingly ordinary facade, a storm was brewing.
Yes, and like many seemingly perfect pictures, the cracks started to show. The marriage was strained, burdened by infidelity and financial woes, ultimately leading to a separation. It's during this time that a man named Robert Knickerbocker enters the picture. Robert, who was married and did not want children, became the focal point of Diane's affections, an obsession that would later weave its way into the very fabric of this case.
That's right. This relationship with Robert becomes a recurring motif, a sort of dark undercurrent in the narrative. It's important to understand that Robert, as we'll see, did not share Diane's desire for a family life, adding another layer of complexity to this already tangled web of relationships.
So we have a woman navigating a failing marriage, harboring a potent infatuation, and facing the pressures of raising three young children. It's a recipe for stress, for sure. But does it explain the events of that horrific night?
That's the question that investigators grappled with. As they pieced together the events of May 1983, Diane's account of that night became central to the investigation. She claimed that while driving her children down a quiet road, a stranger appeared, demanding her car. When she refused, he opened fire, shooting her and her children before fleeing into the night. A horrific tale, a mother desperately trying to shield her children from harm. Yet something about this narrative didn't ring true.
And that's where this deep dive takes a truly chilling turn right. Because as the investigation progresses, Diane's seemingly airtight story starts to unravel. What initially appeared as a random act of violence slowly morphs into something much more disturbing.
Exactly. What's fascinating and disturbing is how those initial cracks in the story emerged. They weren't grand pronouncements or dramatic discoveries, but rather subtle inconsistencies, tiny details that didn't quite align. For instance, Diane, while claiming to have been shot, had a surprisingly minor wound on her arm. More importantly, her demeanor at the hospital, though understandably shaken, seemed oddly detached, especially given the severity of her children's injuries.
It's almost like the gravity of the situation hadn't fully sunk in.
That's the chilling part. While medical staff fought to save the lives of her children, witnesses recalled Diane seeming more concerned about the damage to her car. It's a detail that, in retrospect, sends chills down your spine.
And as the investigators delve deeper, the inconsistencies don't stop there, do they?
No, they certainly do not. The forensic evidence, for example, painted a starkly different picture than the one Diane had presented. This is where the science of crime scene investigation really comes into play, and it plays a crucial role in debunking Diane's claims.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about how this forensic evidence started to expose the truth.
Well, one of the most compelling pieces of evidence was the blood spatter pattern found inside Diane's car. Forensic analysts, you see, they're like artists who use blood as their paint. They can study the direction, shape, and size of bloodstains to reconstruct what happened during a violent crime.
That's incredible. So what do these bloodstains reveal?
They told a story that contradicted Diane's account entirely. The patterns indicated that the shots were fired from the driver's seat, not from outside the car as Diane had claimed.
Wow, that's a huge discrepancy. Did the forensic team find anything else that challenged Diane's version of events?
Oh, there's more. Remember the bushy-haired stranger Diane described as the attacker? While despite extensive searches and interviews, investigators found no trace of this mysterious individual. And perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from the murder weapon itself. The gun used in the shooting was traced back to Diane, despite her initial denial of owning a firearm.
So we have a story falling apart. A lack of evidence to support her claims, and forensic evidence directly implicating Diane. It's starting to feel like a very different picture than the one initially presented.
You're absolutely right. The investigation bit by bit chipped away at Diane's story, revealing a much darker truth lurking beneath the surface. But there was one piece of the puzzle that brought this horrifying image into sharp focus, a testimony that shattered the remnants of doubt and sent shockwaves through the nation.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
We're talking about the testimony of Diane's daughter, Christie, right?
Yes. Christie, who was 8 years old at the time of the shooting, had suffered a stroke as a result of her injuries and was initially unable to speak. But as she began to recover, she slowly started to communicate. And what she revealed sent chills down the spines of everyone involved in the case.
It's almost too horrific to imagine. To have endured such trauma at such a young age, and then to be the one to expose the truth, it's heart-wrenching. What exactly did Christie reveal about that night?
Well, using a combination of gestures and words, Christie bravely identified her own mother as the person who had fired the gun. She described how her mother had shot them and then driven them to the hospital, weaving a tale of a fabricated attack along the way.
It's a truly chilling moment in the case. A daughter forced to confront the unthinkable, that the person who brought her into this world was the same person who nearly took her out of it.
It's a betrayal of the most sacred bond, and it shifted the investigation into overdrive. The motive, which had remained somewhat elusive until this point, began to crystallize. Remember Diane's infatuation with Robert Knickerbocker? Well, investigators theorized that Diane, blinded by her obsession with Robert, saw her children as obstacles to their relationship.
Wait, are you suggesting that Diane shot her own children so that she could be with a man who didn't even want children in the first place?
It's a chilling thought, but it's the theory that investigators pursued. They believed that Diane, consumed by her desire for a life with Robert, a life free from the responsibilities of motherhood, had taken drastic, horrific measures to achieve her goal.
It's a chilling illustration of how obsession can warp a person's perception, blinding them to the most basic human instincts, even the love of a mother for her children.
It's a case that delves into the darkest recesses of the human psyche, forcing us to confront the terrifying potential that lurks within seemingly ordinary individuals. But remember, this is just one interpretation of the events. As the case moved towards trial, the prosecution would have to prove this theory beyond a reasonable doubt.
So we have a mother accused of an unspeakable act, a community grappling with the unthinkable, and a legal battle about to begin. This is where the story takes on a whole new level of intrigue. We're about to step into the courtroom to witness the clash between the prosecution's narrative and the defense's attempts to counter it.
It's a battle over truth, perception, and ultimately the very nature of justice.
The courtroom became the stage for a dramatic showdown, a battle between competing narratives, each vying for the jury's attention.
Trials that involve crimes against children always carry an extra layer of intensity and added weight to the proceedings. And in this case, the prosecution's task was twofold. They had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Diane Downs was indeed the shooter, and dismantle the defense's attempts to cast doubt on the evidence and present alternative explanations.
It must have been a difficult task, especially considering the nature of the crime. How did the prosecution go about building their case?
The prosecution presented a meticulous case, weaving together the threads of forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and most importantly, Christie's heart-wrenching account of that night. They painted a picture of Diane as a woman driven by selfish ambition, a woman so consumed by her desire for a life with Robert Knickerbocker that she was willing to sacrifice the well-being of her own children.
That's a very powerful and disturbing image. Did the defense offer any counter-arguments? How did they try to explain away this mounting evidence?
The defense, as is often the case, employed several strategies to counter the prosecution's narrative. They attempted to discredit Christie's testimony, suggesting that a child who had experienced such trauma might have a distorted memory of the events. They also raised questions about the forensic evidence, proposing alternative interpretations of the blood spatter patterns and the lack of a clear motive.
It's interesting how in these high-stakes legal battles, every piece of evidence, every word spoken, is scrutinized and dissected, with both sides fighting to control the narrative.
That's the very nature of our legal system. It's a system designed to ensure fairness and due process, where both the prosecution and the defense have the opportunity to present their arguments and challenge the evidence. But in this case, the prosecution's case, bolstered by Christie's courageous testimony, proved to be insurmountable.
And what was the outcome of this trial? Did the jury side with the prosecution's narrative?
After weeks of intense deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Diane Downs was found guilty on all counts: attempted murder, assault, and murder. The judge, recognizing the severity of her crimes, sentenced her to life in prison plus 50 years, ensuring that she would likely spend the rest of her days behind bars.
It's a sentence that reflects the gravity of the crime she committed, a stark reminder that actions have consequences, especially actions as heinous as those perpetrated by Diane Downs.
It's a case that left an enduring mark on everyone involved, a case that continues to fascinate and horrify, raising questions about the dark side of human nature, the fragility of family bonds, and the devastating consequences of obsession.
It's also a story that underscores the importance of resilience and the indomitable spirit of those who survive such trauma. What happened to Christie and Danny after the trial? How did they cope with this unimaginable experience?
Well, in a remarkable display of compassion, the lead prosecutor in the case, Fred Hughey, and his wife adopted Christie and Danny, offering them a safe and loving home.
That's an incredible act of kindness, to open their hearts and home to the children of the woman they had just prosecuted.
It speaks volumes about their character, their unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of people, even in the face of unspeakable darkness.
What about Diane Downs? What became of her after the trial? Did she ever accept responsibility for her actions?
Diane Downs has always maintained her innocence, claiming she was a victim of circumstance, wrongfully accused and convicted. In a strange twist to this already bizarre story, she even managed to escape from prison in 1987, remaining at large for 10 days before being recaptured.
That's like something out of a Hollywood movie.
Right.
A convicted murderer on the run, fueling public fascination with the case even further. It's a stark reminder that even behind bars, the story doesn't always end.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the human capacity for denial, for clinging to a fabricated reality, can be incredibly powerful.
So here we are decades after the events of that horrific night, still grappling with the complexities of the Diane Downs case, a case that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the potential for darkness within seemingly ordinary people, a case that reminds us that even in the sacred bond between a mother and her children, there could be a terrifying capacity for betrayal. It's a case that leaves us with more questions than answers.
It certainly does. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about human nature.
It also prompts us to consider the warning signs, the subtle red flags that might indicate that someone is capable of such horrific acts.
Absolutely. Understanding the nature of obsession, recognizing the patterns of abusive behavior. These are crucial steps in preventing similar tragedies.
Well, this deep dive has been an emotional roller coaster, a journey into the heart of a case that continues to captivate and horrify.
It's a story that stays with you, that's for sure.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Diane Downs case here on CrimePod Castle. We hope this episode has provided some insights into the complexities of this crime and the enduring impact it has had on everyone involved.
It's been a fascinating, albeit chilling discussion.
And to our listeners, don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more captivating true crime stories. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel for bonus content and behind-the-scenes insights. Until next time, stay curious, but most importantly, stay safe.